Nearly 3 dozen chefs, some from China, some born in America, but all with one thing in common: the love of food.
For us, it makes a lot of sense because, food is all about getting people together. And we decided to bring 33 chefs together from across the country. And then we tried to imagine what it would be like if they were having a conversation.
A new exhibit at the Museum of Chinese in America is called Sour, Sweet, Bitter, Spicy. It's not just describing food, but also describing the lives of Chinese Americans.
For many Chinese immigrants to this country and possibly to other countries, the Chinese phrase 吃苦, eating bitterness, is very prevalent. And if someone were to say that to someone in a Chinese culture, 我们现在就吃苦, let's just eat some bitterness now, because the hope is that the future is going to be better. Prior generations have eaten the bitterness, not just your parents or your grandparents, but all those generations of people who have fought discrimination.
The museum is not just exhibiting food, it's also preserving history. This is a Chinatown general store. Here, people could buy tea, get help with translation, and they could even send mail back home. Chinatowns began to rise in the late 1800s, in part because of a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act. It limited immigration into the U.S. based on ethnicity and remained in effect until 1943. Museum curator Herb Tam says the Chinese Exclusion Act is not really taught in American schools.
It's hard not to think of ourselves as victims, and it's hard not to keep, talking about these things. And I think what we found is it's very necessary to keep emphasizing there's this history of sort of institutional racism that Chinese in America have had to face, and that also that there's this incredible culture that has grown out of this bitterness and this struggle.
As some Chinese Americans were attacked, even murdered, many Chinese families remained separated for the rest of their lives. Those who stayed gradually formed Chinatown communities, helping them feel safe and connected.
The current executive orders have been placed on 7 countries, on refugees and other citizens who are trying to come into this country, is very reminiscent of what happened in the late part of the 19th century against the Chinese. The work of the museum is so important. What if the Chinese Exclusion Act had been in our history books? What if we had learned about the Exclusion Act and then the aftermath and the burden of that legacy? If our voice was a little bit stronger, would we not see what we're seeing today?
Earlier this year, the museum began asking visitors what they thought about the future of America. The question doesn't mention US President Donald Trump, but almost every answer posted does. Many believe what happened to the Chinese could serve as food for thought about what's happening today. Han Peng, CGTN, New York.